We're learning Perek Vav Halacha Aleph, Hilchos Chametz U'Matzah. Mitzvah Semen HaTorah Le'echol Matzah B'leil Chamish Oso. Shene'emar, as it says, we'll go down to the Peirush. You have to eat, when do you have to eat matzah? The 15th night of Nisan. It says Be'erev Teichlu Matzos. This is Shemois Yud Beis Yud Ches. B'chol Mokim. That means any place in the world, not only Eretz Yisrael, even in Chutz La'aretz. B'chol Zman, even when there's no Beis HaMikdash. Lo'itolya Achida Zu B'Korban Pesach. It doesn't have to do with the Korban Pesach. This is a mitzvah of matzah. It's a separate mitzvah of its own. It's a mitzvah b'fnei atzmo. Mitzvahs we call alayla. The mitzvah is a whole night. Now the Gemara says further. The Peirush says further. B'shar or regel. The rest of Pesach, Hilchos Chametz is rishus. Hilchos Chametz is rishus, and if you if he wants to eat matzah, he can eat it, or you can eat rice or doichen. Millet. As it says that b'niga adin, rice is mutter. B'niga Ashkenaz, as opposed to the minig of Eidot HaMizrach, is not to eat kitnias, which is anything which could be made into a bread, even though it's not a real bread. Or kloyos, or you can eat wheat which has been roasted, or Peirush, or fruit. For the night of the 15th, it's a choyvet to eat a kezayis u'matzah. That's enough. Once he did the kezayis, it's enough. He fulfilled his obligation. Wherever he is, and whatever time in the 6,000 years that the world exists. My Mishnah cites the Gemara Psochim 128. Omar Rabba, Matzah is deraisa, but more is derabanan. If you eat matzah is deraisa, more is derabanan. Because Achiz more, it says the obligation of eating more is only, it says, but the Korban Pesach al matzah is more yechlu. You should eat the Korban Pesach with matzah and more. But when there's no Korban Pesach, there's no mitzvah in Torah to eat more. It's only midarabanan. It's interesting. The Sam Soiver brings down that in the Midbar, when they didn't have the Korban Pesach, because they weren't in Eretz Yisrael, they ate more. But he doesn't bring a source. Now, matzah, even today, is deraisa. Rabbi Yaakov says both this one and that one are derabanan. That today even matzah is derabanan. That's what Rabbi Yaakov says. The Gemara continues. We find proof to Rava from the posuk, because the posuk says 6 days yom teichel matzah, 6 days you'll eat matzah. So yom hashvi atzeres. And then it says, just like the 7th day is a rishus, the Sheish Yom is a rishus. So the Gemara continues, I might think Yochel Aflai Rishon rishus, that the first night is also rishus, meaning they learn the posuk of Sheish Yom to mean 6 days you're permitted, 1 day you're obligated. That there is in the first night a chiyuv to eat matzah. Oh, I only know this when the Beis HaMikdash is existing. That you bring a Korban Pesach. The Beis HaMikdash is not existing. How do I know? Because it says Be'erev Teichlu Matzos, because the posuk made it an obligation. So you see in the Brisa, it's a mitzvah same in Torah in every place and every time. And the Leila said it to eat matzah, and that doesn't have to do with Achilas HaPesach. When he eats a kezayis, he's yotzi dechavosoi. So the Maggid Mishnah cites that we find in many places in Psochim is a chiyuv le'rishon lechol kezayis matzah. Lecha Mishnah cites the Gemara. We find that Hilchos Chametz U'Matzah from 6 hours and further, according to Rabbi Yehuda, oiver b'lo yisesa. According to Rabbi Shimon, you're not oiver an avera. The Lecha Mishnah cites the Gemara. Hilchos Chametz U'Matzah from 6 hours and further. According to Rabbi Yehuda, he's over below. He says to eat it before the Zman. According to Rabbi Shimon, he's not over. And it seems clarified. According to Rabbi Yehuda, we learn that matzah bisman hazeh deraisa on the pasuk shivas yom techol olo matzahs. Rabbi Shimon is of the opinion that you're not over on achilas matzah on the 14th of Nisan from 6 hours and further. That because matzah hazeh, he learns that the chiv to eat matzah bisman hazeh is from be'erev toichlu matzahs. The Lechem Mishnah asks a question. The Rambam paskins like Rabbi Yehuda. Eat Chametz U'Matzah Pesach from Sheisha Zumala Yoyve B'Lo Yisesa. So he learns from a different pasuk. And how did you write here that the mitzvah of Achilas Matzah is learned from the pasuk be'erev toichlu matzahs, which is like Rabbi Shimon and not like Rabbi Yehuda? And he answers that the Rambam learns from the pasuk from be'erev toichlu matzahs only that there's a mitzvah saseh to eat matzah Noel Pesach. He doesn't learn how the chiv today to eat matzah is from the pasuk, but rather the limud is from the pasuk shivas yom techol olo matzahs ke Rabbi Yehuda. The Sha'ar Melech and the Tam Melech ask a question, and therefore they say that the sugya is talking that the Lechem Mishnah questions is Mishnah Nidaches, because it's not the main place, because there's other sugyos, other places in Shas that we learn that Rava says you learn from the pasuk be'erev toichlu matzahs that there's a chiv. Usually the halacha like Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Yehuda is like Rabbi Yehuda, only if that's the only place. But since Rava says it from this pasuk as well, is therefore that it would come out that even according to Rabbi Yehuda there's such a pasuk, and not only according to Rabbi Shimon. Therefore, we can understand the answer of the Lechem Mishnah. Now, achilas matzah after lechatzos leil Pesach. The Magen Mishnah cites mitzvos kol halayla. Thus, we see. Did I press the right place? No. Magen Mishnah cites that the mitzvos kol halayla is found in the Mishnah. Anything that the mitzvah says at night is kosher the whole night. And he's of the opinion like Rabbi Akiva, who takes the position in Psochim 120b that even the time of Achilas Pesach kol halayla, you can eat Pesach a whole night. Like we find Korban Pesach, we learn Perek Ches Halachot Ezvah. But Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah disagrees and is of the opinion that the Korban Pesach is only until Chatzos. And according to him, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, even the time of Achilas Matzah is only to Chatzos. We pass like Rabbi Akiva when he disagrees with his compatriot. The Rambam paskins that the Chiv of Achilas Pesach and Matzah is all night. And he besides further that there are those who paskin that codify the halacha like Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah that the zman is till chatzos, because one Stam Mishnah is like Rabbi Akiva. There's 3 times that we find it in a Stam Mishnah, meaning a Mishnah without telling us who the author is like Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. So Rebbe therefore made the halacha like Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. Therefore, they codify the halacha that you can only eat Pesach till chatzos. And the Achilas Matzah is concurrent with the time of the Achilas Pesach, according to Rava, in Psochim 120b, and therefore after Chatzos, because he says, according to Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, you're not Yoitza, and therefore you wouldn't be Yoitza Matzah after Chatzos. But the Magen Mishnah says that the Iker Halacha is like who? Like the Rambam, and the mitzvah is all night, because the Gemara says in Yevomis 101b, what do I care about whether it's one Stam Mishnah or Trei Stami? And therefore, even though there's more than one Mishnah and that disagrees, that seems to infer that halacha is like Rabbi Elazar, but if we have a disagreement with one Mishnah and another Mishnah which states the statement like one of the 2 sides, then we pass it according to the Stam. But once you have quite a few stams, there's no klal, and therefore we go back to the law that halacha is Rabbi Akiva, with Rabbi Akiva when he disagrees with one of his associates as opposed to when he disagrees with many. The Atzlach points out in Broches Tes on base 9b and Psochim 120b that Hilchos Korban Pesach, the Rambam says, we mentioned in many places that the Pesach is not eaten until Chatzos in order to distance a person from sin. In Minat Torah, you can eat it all night until the morning. So the Rambam says that it's only Midrabanan you have to eat it till Chatzos. Here, when he talks about the time of eating matzah all night, he doesn't mention that Midrabanan you have to eat it only till Chatzos. So he questions why doesn't he mention it, and he answers, he explains, if you leave over from Korban Pesach when the morning comes along, so you're over on a lav, you're not allowed to leave over from the Korban Pesach. And there's also you have to be concerned lest somebody eat it after Alois HaShachar, and it's called noiser. By kochim, anything that's left over, you're not allowed to eat after its time, and you're over chorus. Therefore, the Chacham made Xera, and they should have said you could eat it only till Chatzos. However, matzah, there's no lav that you can't leave it over. In fact, when they went out of Mitzrayim, they took it with them. And also, you're not over when you'll eat it after the first night. Therefore, the Rambam feels that with Rabbanon, you can eat matzah all night, even in a time when there's no Korban Pesach, because when there's a time of Korban Pesach, you might equate the Korban Pesach with the matzah. And they did not say that you can only eat it till Chatzos. But there are Rishonim who have the opinion that Allah is like a Beloz ben Azariah, that the time of Achilles Pesach is till Chatzos, Minat Torah. Therefore, the time of the eating matzah is also only till Chatzos. And they have the opinion that even the Poskim, like Rabbi Kiva, that the mitzvah Minat Torah is all night, as we explained, the Pesach, that they should eat it until Chatzos to distance one from Aveira. So by matzah, one should eat it before Chatzos. The Rosh says so, that it could be that according to Rabbi Kiva, you have to distance yourself and eat matzah only prior to Chatzos, like, at least the kazayas of the night. Like Gores Maimon says, it's a mitzvah to eat it before Chatzos in order to distance a person from Aveira. And the Beis HaLevi in Chelik Aleph cites that this law is like Kriyas Shema, that even though the Kriyas Shema at night, Minat Torah you can do it all night, still the Chacham said you should read it to Chatzos in order to distance a person from an Aveira that he'll forget to daven to say Kriyas Shema. So too b'matzah. And he adds, the mitzvah of Achilas Afikomen, which is at the end of the Seder, you eat the Afikomen, is a commemoration of Korban Pesach. And since the Korban Pesach is definitely at Chatzos, what is the Rae Gann Rabbanon, so the Rambam says you have to eat the Afikomen before Chatzos, even though in Torah the matzah could be eaten all night. Because here the matzah is eaten as commemoration of Korban Pesach. And the words of the Rambam are therefore very accurate, that even B'diavad, if he subsequently passed Chatzos, you shouldn't eat Pesach after Chatzos Midrabanan. Therefore, Gam Afikomen, which is Echel Pesach, needed before Chatzos, even though all the things that we're worried about by Korban Pesach, such as noiser, etc., as we mentioned earlier, do not apply b'afikomen. As the Tzlach explains, since the time of eating Pesach is at Chatzos, you can't make a zecha to eat afikomen after Chatzos for something which you can't eat past Chatzos. Beis HaLevi points out that this is so, and he points it out in the words of the Rishonim, early commentaries. Halacha l'maisa, the halacha is, in the Shulchan Aruch we find, after he ends all of his Suda, he eat from matzah which is shmur under the mappa, because I is called echod, zeichel Pesach, which is eaten ala soiva. You should eat it be'asebo, and you should not make a brocha on it, and you should be careful to eat it before Chatzos. The Mishnah Berurah adds that since it's a commemoration of Pesach, as the Tzlach said. Therefore, you have to eat it in the time of the Pesach. Pesach is only eaten until Chatzois, with the Derais or the Rabbanon, and therefore you have to be careful to eat the first kezayis, or at least the one kezayis that you make under the broch of Hilchos Matzah. You shouldn't make it later than Chatzois. And he clarifies further in Biur Halacha that since, according to Belozav and Azariah and Torah, Pesach is nechal ad Chatzois, the same rule would apply to matzah, because we learn from a hekesh from Pesach. They're made similar. When you eat the Pesach, you have to eat matzah, so that tells us that they're associated, that the times are the same. According to Rabbi Akiva, the Pesach can be eaten all night, the matzah can be eaten all night, and he cites the disagreements between the Rishonim, whether the halacha is like a Belozav and Azariah till Chatzois, or the halacha is like Rabbi Akiva, because the halacha, either because Rabbi Akiva and one of his compatriots, the halacha is like Rabbi Akiva. The Rambam would seem to infer, and the Maggid Mishnah, Balaito, and the Zerua, in the name of Rimi Kurbel, say like Rabbi Akiva, you can eat matzah all night. And there are those who say that this is the Daf Zarif, that he doesn't mention the statement of Rava that if you ate matzah after Chatzois, you're not Yoitze, because Rava is saying that only according to Belozav and Azariah. But Rabbeinu Hanano, and the last parak of Psochim, and the Smag also says the name of the Baal HaTosfos, and after Chatzois you're not Yoitze. So Tosfos writes in the Mordechai, Rabbeinu Yeruchim, and the Razurua, you're not Yoitze and Torah, you eat a matzah after Chatzois. But Tosfos, and the Rekeach, and the Rosh, aren't sure, and therefore they say one should be careful not to eat the first kezayis after Chatzois, and there are Rishonim who write that even according to Rabbi Akiva, only Minat Torah it's a mitzvah to eat matzah. The mitzvah is all night, but he would also admit that to begin with, after Chatzois, we eat when you have no choice. And so says the Gra. Therefore, they decide, many of the Achronim, that certainly you have to eat matzah after Chatzois, because it's something Deraisa Yemachmer. Maybe the halacha is you can eat it all night, but still you shouldn't make a broch after Chatzois, because it's a Safek brocha lahalacha, and the brochas are all the Rabbanan. Furthermore, the Mechaber writes. Now we go to halacha. The only obligation to eat matzah is the first night, and kezayis. Mishabur cites the Gro that if you eat the rest of the time, it's a mitzvah, but it's not an obligatory mitzvah. That means if you eat it, you're keeping a mitzvah, but it's not. You don't have to do it. This is brought down in the Cheskuning, that there are things that you receive reward for when you do them, and a punishment when you don't do them, like matzah b'leila rishon. If you do it, and which you receive schar, if you do it the first night of Pesach, and if you don't do it, you receive punishment. There are things that you get schar, but there's no punishment if you don't do them, like eating matzah the rest of Pesach. Still, by matzah, it's written Shivas Yom Techol Matzah, to teach us that you can eat matzah 7 days and get reward from them. In the Chassam Sofer, he cites La Halacha, the Divrei HaSkuning, and he says he has proof. The Baal HaMeir cites, and even though there's a shiur to eat pas in Sukkah, only the first night of Sukkot, you make a bracha all the other ways of the Chag, that you should sit in the Sukkah. And there are those who question, why don't you make a bracha al Hilchos Matzah all 7 days, just like you do in Sukkah, all 7 days, even though you don't have to eat all 7 days? Because we learn one from the other. There's a Tesvov, there's a Shova Tesvov. And that the first night is obligatory and the rest is permissible. And he explains, because the rest of the time, a person does not necessarily have to eat matzah and still have enough to eat. But in Sukkah, you can't be with 3 days without sleeping, and it will come to sleep, he's chayav to sleep. Therefore, there's an obligation even regarding eating. Shows that the main part of sukkah, as we mentioned now, the sukkah is sleeping in the sukkah. The Avnei Nezer answers that even by Hilchos Matzah, the rest of the 7 days is a mitzvah mamish, just like by sukkah. In by sukkah, we do make a brocha, and it would seem that the question of Balamoyer was only that Hilchos Matzah is all siva. It's a mitzvah of kiyumis, that you accomplish something, and there's a difference between mitzvah kiyumis and mitzvah chiyuvis, meaning an obligation. If you have a beged of 4 garments in 4 corners, you have to put tzitzis on, but if you don't have such a garment, you don't have to. So mitzvah chiyuvis means you have to do it, like putting on tefillin and eating kazayas matzah the first night of Pesach, or eating a pas with sukkah the first night. And in mitzvah kiyumis means tzitzis, that only if you have a beged, a garment that has 4 corners, you have to put in tzitzis. Therefore, by Hilchos Matzah, the Cheskuni and the Balamor of the opinion is a mitzvah kiyumis, like yachid and sukkah, and you still make a brocha on them, even though they are mitzvah kiyumis. Rabbeinu Menoach also explains, answers like the Balamor. You don't say Ashikitshanu the other days of Pesach, because you can eat other things. And he answers, it's like eating meat or other animals, that he doesn't make a brocha Ashikitshanu to eat this specific meat. The Torah says you're not allowed to eat treifa meat. If you want to eat bosa, you can eat it, and you should only eat bosa kosher. And also in Pesach, the Torah didn't say you shouldn't eat chometz, but if you want to eat bread, you should eat matzah. But the Torah, that's what the Torah says, but the Torah doesn't say it's a mitzvah to eat matzah. And therefore, those who choose not to eat anything made of wheat, they eat from other things like rice for Edot HaMizrach, or potato starch for people from Ashkenazim, or fruit, he can do so. And therefore you don't make a brocha on the bread, on the matzah that you would eat. And he writes further, so I remember that my Rebbe told me, in the name of Rav Shmuel Rav Shloimeh, that you don't make a brocha on the rest of Pesach, you only make matzah the first night when you eat the first gezaris.